Welcome, everybody. Tonight's class is going to be a really, really fun one. I'm going to need you to put your thinking caps on because we're going to approach a lot of topics that they're a little bit outside of mainstream science. They merge a little bit of metaphysical, and you're going to have to use your imagination a little bit. It's not to say that it's not science. It's just to be able to wrap it all together. You're going to have to think outside the box a little bit, and you're going to have to think outside of just standard chemistry. So tonight's class is going to be on Advanced TRS, Piezoelectric effect in crystals, the pineal gland, consciousness and tension, and dreaming. And we're going to kind of wrap it all together and bring it all together and try to make this as coherent as possible for everybody, because this is a lot of topics to wrap into one, and unless you're used to working with this stuff, it's just it kind of fries the mind a little bit, but it's super neat. I'm going to try to put it really simply though, so that way I'm not trying to sound smarter than I am. This way I'm just going to try and express, what is. And so the first thing that we're going to work on is we are going to share my desktop screen, and we are going to talk about the piezoelectric effect. Piezoelectric effect means motion into electricity, and this happens with crystals. Almost all crystals express some kind of piezoelectric ability. And each one, as you can see, the cubic versus tetragonal versus hexagonal versus monocyclic, each has a different representation of the way that its electrical field will be expressed. Piezoelectric means motion into electricity. And so here's kind of how I want you to understand, because so many people get hung up on, oh my gosh, TRS is aluminum. Well, I'm going to stop this for a sec. That, oh, there's aluminum in TRS or alumina and it's poisonous, and that's none of that is the case whatsoever. The aluminum is the glue that holds the molecule together. There are over 50 types of zeolites that all fall into a class of crystal class family called aluminosilicates, which include aquamarine, stilbite, ruby, heliodor, apophyllite, astrophyllite, clinoptilolite. Clinoptilolite is the actual zeolite that is TRS. So there's a lot of different aluminosilicates, and there are a lot of different zeolites, and not all of them are created equally, just like we've seen in this picture here. Each different crystal class family is going to have a different piezoelectric expression in the way that its piezoelectric effect is expressed. And so what makes a crystalline structure different than a standard structure? I'm going to use a very simple example of carbon and diamonds. Basically, if we take carbon, which diamonds are made of carbon, that's their base building block, it's just carbon that's in a crystalline lattice. If I were to just give you carbon right now, you would know it as activated charcoal. So it's that black staining powder, that if you, the soot, charcoal, that's activated charcoal, that is carbon basically in its purest form. However, diamond is also pure carbon. The only difference between the two is that the carbon has turned itself into a crystalline lattice. And this crystalline lattice, it does not compress very well. It is a very organized structure. It is a transmuter or a transformer of energies. That is what a crystal does. Because their atoms are locked in this crystalline structure, all different types of vibration are converted, and energy that goes into the crystal, the energy that comes out of it is more coherent than what comes in. So when we send energy into a crystal, what comes out the other side is more coherent, basically meaning it's more organized, it's more structured, because a crystal structure is very organized. Energy passing through it becomes organized. So let's go ahead and let's look at the next little, we'll call it a slide that I've got for us here. Basically, a crystal can produce electricity when its static structure is disturbed by as little as 10%. So basically, this crystal here, this looks a lot like a quartz crystal. Quartz crystal, oh, this is super neat. And we have to get into a little bit more crystallography before we get started too much. There is a quartz crystal inside of every single electronic device that you own. From basically quartz, every electronic device, and quartz is made of silica. Silicon, that's why they call it Silicon Valley, is there is a quartz crystal in your processor in every computer that is programmable, and that's what makes it work. So now please bear with me for a little bit. Programmable and crystals, I want you to just make a little note of this, put a little bloop, crystals and programmable. That is what makes your electronic device work, is it has a programmable crystal in the processing unit of it, your LCD displays, basically your liquid crystal display, when a different type of electricity is put through it, a different color comes out, a different picture. That's how all of this works. The electric field off of your finger when you touch your phone, that's what makes it interact with the crystal display over the deal. So it can go both ways, electricity in and electricity out. The old radios actually used to have a little quartz crystal inside of it, and when you turn the tuning dials, what it had was two metal rods that would push on the quartz crystal and either compress it or let it decompress a little bit. And by how much you compress that crystal, it would pick up different radio waves because you changed the piezoelectric field and the structure of it, that it would resonate now with different radio frequencies. I apologize during the course of this because this is a really interesting topic that I'm kind of doing on the fly, so I'm going to jump around a little bit, but it's kind of important. Here's the piezoelectric effect as I was talking about in quartz crystals. We look on the left, if you notice this little hexagonal structure here, this looks a lot like the Cosiva logo, which looks a lot like the clinoptilolite, which is the zeolite that is in advanced TRS. So when you add it to tension and compression, if you stretch it, basically it sucks energy in, and if you compress it, it emits an electric field out that has a shape to it, much like when we looked here. It has a shape to it. This isn't a perfect representation of it, but it's the closest we're going to be able to get. If you cut a crystal either on its y-axis, its x-axis, or you can even do its z-axis, which is along this way, it will also then express a different piezoelectric effect. And so that's what we're seeing when we look on these here of the x, the y's, and the z's, is they're different axes or different points of consciousness that's in them. So as Nikola Tesla says, a crystal is a living being. Whether we can understand its life or not, it nonetheless is alive. Just like it's very difficult for us to understand the life of a tree or a plant. We can't really communicate with it with words. It can talk to us in many different ways. And one way it would talk to us is, say, if I were to go out and look at my plants, if they're thirsty, how do they tell me? The leaves droop. That's a type of communication. And so crystals communicate in very interesting ways, much like in the quartz crystal tuner of a radio. And I'm going to try not to get too metaphysical in this, but we need to understand that consciousness and human consciousness interacts with its environment, just like essential oils, especially how it does with crystals. So we're going to try and get to this. I got to move this thing down, unfortunately, or I'm never going to be able to see it just because that little stop recording deal comes. We're getting there. We're getting there. I'm sorry. So piezoelectric effect, it's also used in ultrasonic transducers. So your ultrasound machines that you got are made of crystals as well. Basically, when you've got little electrodes, and when you apply electrical field to it, it shoots the sound out of it, and it can also receive the sound and then vice versa, turn it back into an electrical signal as well. Very, very fascinating, neat stuff. We'll come back to this in just a moment because that's a little bit more intense. So now that we've kind of covered crystals, we've kind of covered the piezoelectric effect, we need to get into consciousness, because I do need to go back to a screen share. My complete apologies, and I have to find the right thing to look at. Basically, let's use here. Oh, not here. We're going to use this one. Basically, we're going to take this crystal because hopefully everybody can see my little mouse plus cursor. Heat is a measure of vibrational rate down at like basically a molecular and atomic and even subatomic level. But basically heat, when you heat something up, it starts vibrating more because crystals cannot vibrate outside of their crystalline lattice. That heat then gets expressed instead as an electric field, as ultrasonic waves, and also as light is another way that it can be seen, that if you take a quartz crystal in the dark and if you hit it with a hammer, you will see light be emitted from it. It is important to note that human genetics and human cells not only use ultrasonic waves to communicate with each other, so your cells will squeak in little ultrasounds to communicate with each other, but there's a thing called optogenetics, that light is used as well to signal cell division and other processes that come through. And when that light signal gets messed up, you can have problems in cell division, and cells don't know when to communicate, or replication slows down. And this is important because we're relating it back to crystals, back to consciousness, back to how they are energy more coherent when it comes out one side versus the other. So this heat, when it vibrates around, it's basically a measure of heat vibrating around. When the heat basically comes in towards a crystal and that vibration, that heat, what ends up happening when that crystal is heated instead is it gets more coherent and comes out as an electric field and is expressed that way. So that is a little bit of a measure of what we're talking about, of how we need to take a look at things from a different perspective when we're talking advanced TRS. Yes, we have advanced TRS that we can explain it electromagnetically, that we say toxins have a positive charge, the zeolite has a negative charge, and they together and they neutralize each other. That is one way to look at this, at how this is going to work. Now, the rest of the science that I'm going to move on from this point, basically everything to this point right now is very concrete, left field. This is exactly what it is. Now, when I hit this point, this is a little bit more experimental science that I don't want anybody to take this as an actual fact, or I'm saying this is what the TRS actually does. I'm saying that you need to, I would ask you to think about it. That's it. I'm asking you to think about these topics as we move forward from here and how this applies to your TRS, to crystals, to human consciousness, to the electric field. There is one thing that I've got to look up, and you guys can, because this is going to be important, and I forgot to look it up earlier. It is called Kirlian photography. Sorry, Kirlian photography. Basically, the human body has an electromagnetic aura around it. This Kirlian photography is very fascinating stuff. You can look up the difference between organic vegetables versus conventional vegetables and how much bigger electric field comes off of it. And this stuff is absolutely beautiful. But this is important to get into because when we start talking as far as advanced TRS goes, there's that electric conversion and the piezoelectric effect that we need to talk about. That you are literally putting crystals into your body, and sugars. Sugars are crystals. There's many different types of crystals that we actually put into the body, but the advanced TRS, we really need to understand because of this piezoelectric effect that you have now heated up the crystal. And what could possibly happen, once again, I'm not saying that this is true, I'm saying what could happen that if you had a hole in your electric field, say you had a bunch of heavy metals in this neck area here because that positive charge basically fully dampens the electromagnetic signal and the aura charge, what could potentially happen is this advanced TRS, when you spray it in here, it could help fill in these gaps electromagnetically, and make this aura look differently because of the electric field being emitted by the TRS being in the body and expressing that piezoelectric effect because you are putting it under heat and tension and compression just as your body moves around. And when you get into these cellular levels and everything, things get very, very unique. We've got blood pressure. Well, that's pressure being put on there every time the heart beats. When you contract a muscle, then you get inside the cells and intercellular, extracellular pressure, whole different can of worms that everything needs to get into there. So that is something we could take a look at, that the human aura electric field, that advanced TRS has the possibility to be able to interact with this aura and kind of fill in the gaps, if you will, in the holes in your aura from the toxicity that gets here. If somebody would say, hey, I've got a bunch of neck pain, or like I had all my heavy metals that were basically in like this base of my neck here from all of my bad habits and all of my life experiences, military vaccines, and basically treating my body like shit while I was an alcoholic. In this area, definitely I would have a lot of pain, and over the course of using the TRS, as these heavy metals get out of there, this electrical flow is going to be much, much smoother throughout the body. So this is kind of where I'm telling you it gets a little bit of experimental, because we would have to use this Kirlian photography to be able to show before and after advanced TRS. There's something called a Zytoscanner that you put your hand on, and it basically measures your electric field and recommends different products to you. Essential oil users will be very familiar with this, and it's amazing how accurate that stuff is. It is really neat. It's actually, this is going to be the wave of the future with doctors, that they're going to be replaced, that we don't have to guess what is wrong with you. You can just measure your electric field and say, okay, here's the infection that you have, or the nutrient deficiency, or the excess. So moving along, now that we've talked about this electric field, now we're going to get a little bit more advanced into it, and we're going to start talking about the pineal gland and its function, and going into human consciousness. Human consciousness, I like to start this off with the human consciousness aspect, because crystals respond to intention, as does everything in the world. You are basically a moving, living, walking crystal, and your vibration is what you are sending out, and you are receiving different information. It's the vibration going in and out. Crystals are programmable, just like I'd mentioned with the computer and the quartz crystal that's in there. I'm not trying to get all hippy-dippy and say, let's get into Marcel Vogel crystals and all of that stuff. Fascinating, but that's not the topic I'm here to talk about today. We are saying the crystal's programmable in your computers, your cell phones, your radios, your TVs. All LED lights are crystals that emit light that come from electricity. Neat stuff. So as far as intention goes, when it comes to using your advanced TRS, these crystals respond to your intention, because your intention is a vibration. If you can pay attention while using your advanced TRS, when you spray it, have a very specific intention in mind and have a specific purpose when you spray it of what that spray is going to be for. Not only when you do that, also make it very heart-based. The heart has the most powerful electric field of anywhere in the body. It's something like 50,000 times stronger electromagnetic field than the rest of anywhere. So when it is heart-based, we take a look at some of these people that are building their business and some of these parents that seem to get better results than other people. The problem is, because we are dealing with consciousness and crystals, we need to ask the question of, is that parent, while they're using it, using a heart-based intention, or are they just spraying it, not paying attention? And the same thing comes to how I always like to say with the business, make it operate heart-based, because anything from the heart-based is immortal and eternal and non-destructive self-compression. It's able to continue on, versus if you are just making a sale, that's the end of it. It has an end form, versus if you are going business from the heart and you genuinely want this product to help people and help get them better in some way, shape, or form. I'm not saying heal or cure any disease whatsoever. If you literally want this product to help people, that is operating from a heart-based business, and your business and the crystals will respond to that vibration. And how that will change how it interacts in the body is a very unique experiment that would be very tough to do. But I'm asking you, as I'm going through all of this, to please think about that when you run this business and when you do it, please make it from the heart-based standpoint. I did hit the record because I didn't want to go back to all this. I'm like, oh, please, I did record. Anyway, so that is extremely important to understand, that the heart-based, the more you can do it that way, there is the potential to get far more out of your business and far more from the actual product itself, and have it interact differently with your body because of the intention you had while using it, versus carelessly spraying it, or or if you're in an angry mood or whatever else. Try to center yourself, ground yourself, have a very specific heart-based intention while using it. That has the potential, I'm not saying it will, but the potential for it to do something different. It's a possibility. So while we basically covered intentions and crystals and the piezoelectric effect, let's move on to the pineal gland. Well, we get into pineal gland, there's a lot of people that, some people get really freaked out about it, because if you say pineal gland or third eye, the second you say third eye, people freak out and they say, oh my gosh, you're into devil worship. That is not what I'm saying whatsoever. Biblically, it is mentioned pineal, it is called in the body, where Matthew 6:22, if thine eye be single, let thy body be filled with light. They are talking about the third eye, and I'm going to show us really neat stuff when we go on with science as far as this is concerned. But I'm not talking new age or anything crazy. What I'm saying is that this pineal gland, or a third eye, it is an eye just like this one. It has a focusing lens, and it has rods and cones. That is an eye that lives in the middle of your brain in perfect darkness, but yet it has receptors to receive light and a focusing lens within it. Third eye. This is a real actual thing. This is literally what is happening. Is it an eye much like this one that lives in the center of your brain in perfect darkness? Its purpose is to help you connect to basically the higher dimensions of consciousness, basically to your soul, is one of the reasons that it's there. But it's also there to make melatonin, which regulates your sleep and awake cycles. So if you were staring at your phone before bed, or a TV, and unfortunately these lights that I have, I'm not going to be going to sleep for a little while. I have something to help you get to sleep later, but different topic. But basically what that's going to do when all this light comes in, it signals to the eyes and to the pineal gland to not release melatonin, because it's time to stay awake. When the sleep cycle comes, it starts releasing melatonin to regulate your sleep and awake cycles and basically put you into bedtime and your REM sleeps. So there will be many people, perhaps you've noticed that one of the testimonies I've seen many times, people start using TRS, they start sleeping way better. Well, aluminum loves to combine with fluoride and Roundup and basically go in and damage the pineal gland big time, which stops it from being able to make melatonin. Now you can't get into these sleep-awake cycles like you're supposed to. It throws off your electromagnetic field drastically because it changes your thoughts, and your thoughts are very, very, very powerful. Please be aware of that. So that's kind of the function of the pineal gland, is regulating those sleep and awake cycles and producing that melatonin. And when it's compromised by toxicity, it can't do that. Also, it can't connect you to your, we'll call it higher self, we'll call it your soul, we'll call it the creator, we could to the, the source, whatever you want to call it is not my business. It basically is just saying, this is the piece of the body that allows you to connect to these places. And when it's compromised by toxicity, it impairs all of those. The science one that we can say is sleep and awake cycles and people sleeping and dreaming. Now, dreaming, what happens when you dream is your body, when you go to sleep, when you're awake, your soul is for the most part fully present with your body. I mean, trauma will have you disconnected to an extent and everything, but for the most part, your soul is connected to the body when you're waking consciousness. When you go to sleep, what ends up happening is as little as your soul is required will stay with the body to keep it alive. And so when you're using, say, Advanced TRS or something that keeps the body in a lower stress state and keeps the electrical field more aligned, less of your soul has to stay with the body. So when you go dream, your soul is free to travel the cosmos and travel through time. Time is not linear, it's more of a circular. I don't have time to get into that tonight, I'm very, very sorry. But the long story short is, as it goes along, when you are at a higher vibrational frequency, you are able to, your soul is able to leave the body during the night. And that is the reason so many times dreams happen. People who report the emotional experiences during dreams, that's because a piece of your soul has been lost in time to this trauma. And what happens is your soul travels back to that aspect, not so much back, but to that aspect in time to be able to clear it and free the soul up to be able to bring it all back to the present. A very wise man once said, when you shoot an arrow, the arrow doesn't move, it's time around it flows. Once again, a very long topic, but think about that for a little bit. The arrow doesn't go anywhere. It's the time around it flows, giving it the appearance of movement. But this is kind of how to wrap into why people will get the emotional detoxes through TRS, because your body on using it can be less stressed out. It can maintain a more coherent electromagnetic field, and then less of your soul is required to stay here and keep the body alive while you dream, so that you can go to these times of where you've lost pieces of yourself to basically break apart that energy and be able to bring it back to the current present moment. Now we're going to move on to a little bit more neat stuff of when we get to science. We're going to share some stuff. This is super cool. Oh my gosh, this is the neat part. There is, oh yes, so when I talk about the heat energy coming in and going into this way, there's this fractal broccoli. If people aren't familiar with Benoit Mandelbrot and fractals, this basically at the subatomic level is what things start to look like and what crystals, electrical energy fields, it's these toroids and these fractals. They're absolutely beautiful. We could get into the torus function and we could waste a whole lot of time, but I'm not going to. Big one we're going to look at is there are white calcite microcrystals in the pineal gland of the human brain. They're basically harmonic generators and piezoelectric transducers. What does this mean? Let's bring this and break it down to a really, really simple way to put this. In your pineal gland, you have white calcite crystals. It's very neat. If you look at white calcite crystals in like the Big Book of Stones or whatever else, they're used metaphysically to enhance your connection to your higher self and to the creator and all of this stuff. Well, it's very funny that it happens to be a very good description for them, because they actually do, these crystals live in the third eye of the brain. When you get a fluoridated and calcified pineal gland, the fluoride basically goes in there, combines to the calcium of the white calcite crystals. Calcite crystals are very high in calcium. Fluoride goes in there, binds to it, and basically plugs it up so that that eye becomes blind, because it's filled with a bunch of white crud that blocks it up from the fluoride going in and calcifying all this stuff. So the third eye basically has these little crystals that are under 20 nanometers in length, and basically their job is to pick up and send out at the same time electromagnetic signals that communicate with the Schumann resonance and with other things. So when we get into 5G and Wi-Fi's and EMFs and all this, we need to understand that both in the human ear and in the pineal gland, there are calcite crystals being put in there. And this is a super, super neat study. You can find the exact same one here there's cubic, hexagonal, and cylindrical morphologies basically have been identified. So there's multiple types of these white calcite crystals have been found in the pineal gland. And that is what makes the piezoelectric effect, the advanced TRS, the dreaming, the intention, the consciousness interaction, all of this we have to wrap back together into one, and how you run your business and how you're actually using the product of, is it heart-based, or is it you're not paying attention, or is it kind of greed-based that I just want to make a sale, bam, that's it. And that it has an end to that life cycle, versus heart-based has the potential much more so to continue on infinitely and exponentially grow with itself. Just like when you love a child, it grows much more than if you just neglect it or anything else, or yell at like my child like I did earlier, who was playing with the door and slamming it closed and shut. I had to yell at him to stop playing with the door. It's sometimes I've got to work, and it's just the way it goes. He's 4, he can handle me to tell him to stop shutting the door. But all of that being said, I know I covered a whole lot of different topics, and I know each one of them is a rabbit hole and a half on their own. Hopefully this has explained a little bit of how we kind of have to pay attention a little bit more with our TRS, of pay attention when you're using it, how you're sharing it with other people, what's your intention and what do you want to use it for, and then different things for you to be aware of as you're using it to say, is there something else after watching this that maybe I noticed and maybe I can enhance my reality and my consciousness in a whole new way now that I know these things? So without further ado, unless anybody has any other questions, this will pretty much kind of end the presentation, and I'll just open it up to questions and do my very, very best to answer them. I mean, I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to pretend to be any smarter than I actually am. I just have a lot of different, very fascinating hobbies that I like to share the information with. So I'll probably end the recording here just because I have no idea where the questions are going to go, and this will kind of free it up so people can speak a little bit more freely. And also, all I wanted to cover was this for the recording anyway. So thank you, everybody, for joining in and tuning. We're going to end the recording. We're going to stay for a Q&A. And if you want to join more Q&As yourself, well, then join our Business Builder group, and you'll be able to talk about some really neat stuff with us, you know, as time goes along. I'm going to try to do these more regular. So thanks much. Have a good one.